So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a program. Okay, this one we're going to talk about how to use like array, right? And how to access the value, right, of each variant, right, each value in an array. So we need what we call iteration or loop. Okay, so we need to understand that. So let me create a first simple program, like to print out numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so we gonna use loop, right? New Java project, and we want to print, okay, numbers. So that's the program name. So what we like to create, pretty much we're going to print number from 1 to 10. Okay, so we use the loop so when you use the loop, int I equals to 0, so you want to initialize your starting point. Okay, but if you want to do 1 to 10, so I'm going to initialize I to 1, and then what we like to do, normally we just print out, right, I, so that one will show 1, just like that. But if I want to print out to 10, so we should be able to do something like while I less than, okay, if I say less than equals 10, okay, then we go print. So this is a syntax you put in the curly braces, and you always have to increment I, then it's always change, right? So it's going to change and print out 1 to 10. Okay, so if you look at how loop work, this is like a flow chart that I like to explain. So loop is not a branching statement, right? So branching, we can use the diamond to make decision, right? So depending on this expression that you put, right? So if I say I less than, that's expression, I less than 10, I less than equals 10. So maybe I didn't keep I yet, so I said initialize my I equals to 1. So in this case, if I do branching, so I'm going to put an arrow in here. So it's go into the program and check, hey, I is 1 is less than 10, so it should be false, correct? So as we said, if it's false, we want it to go to the either left or right, so we're going to insert the arrows again. So if it's true, you do this. If it's false, you do the other side, right? So something like that, right? So me insert the text. Like true, and so we say it's true, we come here. So that's like branching, right? And then you can do express whatever you need, right? But if you look at iteration, so iteration is different. You see that this one you don't need to increase your I, right? And then you just do whatever you need. It just say true or false. But iteration is different. Okay. Let me just write the syntax. If, right, I, this is in Java, less than equals 10. So you just do the true statement here. And I'm sure you know this is try to refresh. Else you do the false statement. So that's the syntax work. Whenever you see this, right, you make a choice. So it's not going to print 1 to 10 for you, correct? But if we want to print 1 to 10, that means you do repeating over and over again. Okay. So this if else we call branching statement. Now I'm going to show you the iteration. Right, iteration or loop, right? But let's take a look at flowchart first. So same, we can use this whole thing, right? But the diagram is just a little bit different. Alright, so we're gonna move the arrow this a little bit here. When it's false, it's going to exit. But when it's true, it's actually going to do this. It's going to go and do something that you want it to do. Like in this case, what do? We make it to print I. So I'm going to use the parallelogram for print output. Right, so it's going to print I. And when you print I, so what's I at that point? I is pretty much equals to 1. So that's why we want to print 1, and then we want to print 2, 3, 4. Then we need to insert another shapes to do increment your I. Right? So I is going to be I plus plus. Right? So it's going to bounce your I up. And of course, we're not done yet. We need to make the flow to be different. Because we have to go back and loop back, right? We gotta loop back to the beginning, to where the condition is. Then we can start to check what happens at that point, right? So we said, okay, if I still, like at this point, I plus plus make it equals to 2, which is still less than 10, then it's come out and print again. Right, until I plus plus 3 and 3 is still less than 10 and print again, right? And so on until it's get to 11. At that point, it's just a false, so that's why it exit the program. So that's how loop work. See that? So that's called iteration or loop, right? So now syntax. Like I said, you have to initialize your I, you check your expressions. So these are the keys, and then you increment 3 things in the loop. So int I equals to 1, right? And then we can use while, right? I less than equals to 10. So it's going to do something, right? Like we go print, right? Print I, which we can do system.out, and then we do I plus plus to increment it. And that's it. I just copy the flowchart, right? And let's go back. Okay, so now this is very important when you're dealing with array. Okay, this whole thing just review. Now let's see if I want to print the contents of an array. So we're going to declare an array. This can be username, right? Which is an array. How do we make an array? Just a group of data with brackets, right? And then you can initialize them in the curly braces like David, right? This is a group of username. So Matt. Right. So for this sample, I'm going to just make 3. Okay. We can make as many as you want. In this case, if it's 3, then remember how do you access the values in the array? Right. We said each of them has index. This is index 0, right? So in order to access this, you have to do something like uname0 that you get David, correct? So, and so on. When you do Matt, you name 1, right? When you do Yibing, you name 2, right? Now, I need to change this to 0, right? And I'm going to use array to loop through. Size now is 3, correct? And since we start from 0, 0, 1, 2, right? So those are 3 values. So less than is enough, right? So now we're going to print the name. Like we said, you name, right? And put that into bracket because I changed from 0, 1, 2. And that should do. Let's try. There you go. So that's how you access the values. Now, if you want to deal with password, same thing, right? We can make a group of password. If you want to deal with account type, like in this case, we just going to assume that when they have the same index, they're pretty much just the password for David, right? Okay, like this is password for Matt. And this password for Yibing. Okay. Account type, the same. We can just say account type. Right, David can be a faculty, right? And Matt be a staff, right? Yibing can be a student. So same, if you want to access the values of each person, you can just replace your name to password and account type, right? So if you want to check, you can make it simple, like if you prompt the user to do enter your name, right? User name equals to J option pane dot show input dialog. Enter username. So let's test with this one, and the rest is pretty much very similar. Like after you know I, then you can identify right away. Okay. The reason that we want to check, because we're going to use the loop to help, we said if username, right, dot equals to you name I. So that means you match, right? Like in this case, I don't need to print out anymore. This is just applying to. Okay, so that means I found it. So I can just break out of the loop. Else, that means you don't need to do else. Pretty much get loop to the next person to try to find a match. So that means you get an I. So when you found match, you pretty much know what is the username and password by printing the password of this username, right? And account type. So let's test with path.